We will now proceed with the statements and rebuttals forming the actual mock debate. Now, bear in mind, the people who hold to the government storyline were invited to join us today. Only one member said he would, and of course his schedule did not permit him to do that. And so we will now go forward with the slide presentation of the individuals and their statements, which you'll be able to see, and then you'll be able to see and hear the actual facts presented by AE911truth. So the first one that we will start with is lead World Trade Center investigator for the National Institute of Standards and Technology, Shyam Sunder.
Next.
John Gross, co-project leader, WTC Investigations. Materials engineer, Sedanek Barzan, submitted a technical paper explaining the collapse 2 days after 9/11. 2 days after 9/11, you had it all figured out. One of the lead, Leslie Robertson, one of the lead engineers involved with WTC Twin Towers construction. Ronald Hamburger, structural engineer appointed by FEMA to perform the initial investigation for WTC collapse, later participated in the more detailed study by NIST. Gene Corley, structural engineer, OKC bombing investigator, lead investigator for FEMA, WTC collapse investigation. Dave Thomas, president of Mexican for Science and Reason, debated AE911truth on Coast to Coast AM. James Meggs, chief editor of Popular Mechanics, wrote Debunking 9/11 Myth, Why Conspiracy Theories Can't Stand Up to the Facts. Michael Shermer, founding publisher of Skeptical Magazine, wrote op-ed 9/11, Truthers Are a Pack of Lies in Huffington Post.
Oops, forget him.
Thomas Agar, MIT materials engineer, co-wrote Why Did the World Trade Center Collapse? Science, Engineering, and Speculation.
Can't hear you very well.
Van Romero, vice president of research and economic developments at New Mexico Tech, explosive expert lobbyist. Brent Blanchard, explosive expert at implosionworld.com, wrote a critical analysis of the collapse of WTC Towers 1, 2, and 7 from an explosives and conventional demolition industry viewpoint. Abdul Hassan Ashtanet Als, UC Berkeley professor of civil environment engineer, presented Learning from 9/11, Understanding the Collapse of the World Trade Center to House Science Committee. John Magnuson, chairman, CEO, WTC design firm Skillings Ward, Magnuson Berkshire, Inc., board member, Structural Engineers, Institute of Board of Governors. Hyman Brown, vice president, Tishman Realty and Construction, Los Angeles, credited with various roles at WTC, but confirmed top people there don't remember him. The mock debate begins. James Meggs, appearance of CDs.
Often you'll hear conspiracy theories say, look at this, doesn't it look like a controlled demolition? Well, it turns out this is what buildings look like when they fall down.
Well, is that true? What do buildings look like when they fall down? Let's take a look at a few buildings that fell down and see if they look anything at all like these 3 World Trade Center skyscrapers. Here's some buildings that fell down. They fall over. Why? Because they're injured or damaged on the side, on one side or the other. It's an organic, asymmetrical, chaotic process that causes buildings to fall. In this case, the structural steel is not dismembered. The concrete is not pulverized. It's not a symmetrical pile. There's a building at the bottom of this pile. So, and maybe, Stephen, can you help us, structurally speaking, why do buildings fall this way instead of the way they might fall at the World Trade Center?
Well, the original design encompasses a structural system that's completely integrated with all the components. And that's why these buildings are still intact when they're down on the ground, is because all these structural systems tie them together and maintain the integrity of the building, even though the foundation failed or whatever to fall over. The difference with the World Trade Center building is that the complete dismemberment of all portions of the structure can't be explained by the failure of single members or lack of stability causing the building to fall over. So it's basically the total destruction of the buildings is what is inconsistent with the buildings that are just falling over from a gravitational collapse.
And by the way, Stephen is a 37-year structural engineer in Las Vegas. Tony Zambodi is a 37-year mechanical engineer in Pennsylvania.
About 30, actually.
30, I got it. And in New Jersey.
Right outside of Philadelphia.
And Greg Roberts is an author, one of the authors of the nanothermite, the active thermitic materials in the World Trade Center dust paper. He assisted Dr. Jones, Niels Harrod, and others to put their work to the test of scientific scrutiny. Well, let's take a look at what engineered destructive processes look like. In this case, a typical classic controlled demolition, something Steve might have seen in Las Vegas quite a bit, these old hotels. They have a specific set of characteristics. Let's take a look at these one at a time. This is a classic controlled demolition. We have hundreds of examples from all across the country from which to make our comparison because it's the most commonly used method to bring down high-rises. So this is what a high-rise looks like when it's being demolished with explosives. Controlled demolitions can be engineered in many ways. The purpose, of course, is to remove a structure while avoiding damage to adjacent structures and to do so economically. Typically, a tall building like this is demolished by placing thousands of cutter charges throughout the columns and beams in the building and then detonating them in a very precise order. Starting with the interior structure, progressing outwards and upward, synchronistically timed floor by floor. Destroying the interior columns allows the unsupported weight to pull the exterior inward, and destroying the building from the ground up allows the weight of the building to be harnessed to do most of the destruction. So the result is an implosion, producing a vertical, symmetrical collapse at free fall acceleration sometimes into a consolidated rubble pile that's broken up and ready for loading and shipment. Now, this is a feat that only a handful of companies in the United States can accomplish, and fire never has. Let's take a look at some of these key characteristics. We have a sudden onset of destruction at the base. We have a straight-down symmetrical collapse into its own footprint because demolition waves remove those column supports, resulting in a free fall speed often through the path of what was the greatest resistance. Free fall acceleration, faster and faster and faster on the way down, resulting in a total dismemberment of the steel structure for shipping. And there's minimal damage to adjacent structures, sounds and flashes heard and seen by witnesses. Enormous clouds of pulverized concrete from explosives and explosive charges often that are seen at various levels of the building. And of course, chemical evidence of cutter charges. If you have all of these, you have direct evidence of explosive destruction. Now, fire can't accomplish any one of these, really, let alone all 10 of them. Fire is an organic process that works its way through a building every 20 minutes or so in a given area, looking for fresh new fuel sources as it leaves the area burned out behind. So when a building does fall due to fire, and you'll note that it never has in a steel frame high-rise, but say in a wood frame building, it will fall over organically, asymmetrically. Typically, we have experts that agree, yeah, that's a controlled demolition. That helps. Corroborating evidence from structural engineers, others in the know. foreknowledge, because these implosions are produced, planned, carried out months in advance. This is all proof of controlled demolition. Now, World Trade Center 7 has an interesting set of characteristics also. We're going to compare them to what you just saw. How many of you have never heard of World Trade Center Building 7? Like me, 4 years ago. Never before. 1, 2, 3. And let's take a look at it. It's 47 stories tall. What would have been typically the tallest building in most of our states. This building was not hit by an airplane. And it was about 350 feet away from the North Tower, a football field. So when the North Tower went down, Building 7 suffered a little bit of damage from the core columns. According to the official story, it was not a significant factor. But this building collapses 7 hours later at 5:20 in the afternoon. Are there any characteristic features of Building 7's collapse that reflect those of a typical controlled demolition? Let's see. Do we have a sudden onset of destruction at the base of the structure? Let's take a look at our first look, perhaps at Building 7, and as it's narrated by Dan Rather.
And what you're seeing are high shots. Now, here we're going to show you a videotape of the collapse itself.
Describe that.
Now we go to videotape, the collapse of this building.
It's amazing.
Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
James Miggs says this is the way buildings fall down. Dan Rather is using his own intuition. He's telling us that from his frame of reference, he's seen these old hotels in Las Vegas, for instance. Let's take a look from another angle. Do we have a straight down symmetrical collapse into the building's footprint from West Street?
It's gone, man. 17 down.
Let's bring it back up. The penthouse falls a second before the overall collapse and about 10 seconds after the initial collapse, which NIST says is going on inside the building. I'm not convinced yet. Let's compare side by side and see a known controlled demolition on the right and Building 7 on the left. Is there any similarity between these two structural failures? Is there enough to warrant a new investigation into the possible use of explosives, which NIST refuses to do? After telling us they found no evidence for explosives, they acknowledge that they never looked for them, and they still do. But what they do tell us is that these fires, which are the worst fires we have photographic or video evidence of, was the cause of this building's collapse. Now, if these fires were the cause of this building's collapse, wouldn't we expect it to fall again toward its injured or damaged side, where the fires are? But the problem here is that in this area, NIST says the fire started in this area right here on the 12th floor next to column 79. The photographs are very clear, and NIST has a photograph that they cite in their Appendix L of their earlier report that says the fires were out in that area an hour before the collapse. So it could not have been the cause of the collapse.